Hello, I just want to go over just a couple other upgrades I had for my lathe. These are more in depth. And yeah, I'll just go over those quickly. So the issue that arose that first triggered an alarm was when I would put a piece of metal in the chuck and I would turn it, so just go down this way, it would cut about a 0.04 millimeter taper over really a short distance, like 1.5 inches. So then I figured I put a test bar in that I had bought off Amazon, and I found that my headstock was out of alignment with the bedways. So I did some researching around, and the best way that people fix this is they scrape the headstock there to change the angle. So I went about doing that, and when I would I'd scrape a bit, cut a test bar, scrape a bit, cut a test bar, and I can never get it right. And it got to the point where it wasn't really making sense, because when I'd put a test bar in the Morse taper 3 and run a dial indicator across the side, it would turn out good. And then when I'd cut an actual piece, it would come out tapered, so it's not making sense. So then, it's a pretty common upgrade, but I found that the bearings in the headstock, these ones here, were the culprit. And so what would happen is, if I put a dial indicator here and measured the up and down movement in the chuck, there was probably like 1/1000th of play, which is actually quite a bit. So I went ahead and did the pretty common upgrade, putting taper roll bearings in there. And once they got all run in, they seemed to fix that. There's now maybe like 1/10 of 1/1000th. So basically nothing, and probably as good as I can get this lathe to be. And what I used to scrape was a homemade scraping handle out of a file with a carbide insert on the end. Now, I don't know too much about scraping, I'm still a beginner, but I had an expert scraper that I know cut the carbide for me to sharpen it. So once the tapered bearings were installed and good to go, I then went ahead and cutting some test bars to check. And one thing I realized pretty quickly was that it's very important to do a lot of spring passes. While the headstock bearings might be good now, the lathe itself is still very flexible. And this is a 0.0001 inch, a 10,000th indicator there. So you can see that very easily it spins around half the dial. So that is still an issue that can't really be fixed. I have it mounted on a steel plate, and I have also gone ahead since and used brass shims underneath and used a machinist level to get that as straight as I can. So now, just to see how good this is, I have a Mitutoyo caliper here. And you can see it's about 31 at the top. And if I scroll down to the bottom, it is about just over 30. So there's still some taper on this lathe, which I would like to fix more in the future, but for now, that's pretty good considering that this is a 0.01 millimeter caliper. And one last thing, this test bar is just over 2 inches long.